that the end of the movie?
That's near the end of the movie. I don't know. I don't want to really watch that movie anymore. I was there. You know?
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
When that movie comes on this time of year, I mean, this is the hottest time to be Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah.
Hello.
Behind that famous Home Alone scream was a child trapped in hell. At just 10 years old, Macaulay Culkin was worth $50 million, but he didn't even know it. His father made sure of that. Today, the horrifying truth emerges. The threats, the abuse, and the twisted reason Kit Culkin turned his own son into a prisoner of fame. This isn't just another child star story. It's a father's betrayal that will leave you speechless. Macaulay Culkin was born on August 26, 1980, in Manhattan, New York. His family was big, his home was small, and money was always tight. He grew up with 6 siblings in a tiny apartment in Yorkville, a space so cramped that they all had to share bunk beds in one room. There were no doors, just a narrow hallway that served as their home. Privacy didn't exist, but the chaos brought them close. His father, Kit Culkin, had been a stage actor before taking a job at a local church. His mother, Patricia Brentrup, worked as a telephone operator for a casting agency. That connection to the entertainment world would change everything for Macaulay. Life was tough. Macaulay later shared how he used to crawl under theater seats looking for lost change, a small but telling sign of how much his family struggled. But in that crowded apartment, something else was happening. His father had once dreamed of making it as an actor, and now he saw a chance for his kids. Kit pushed them into show business, believing one of them could succeed. Macaulay stood out early. Before he turned 5, he was already performing in off-Broadway productions like Bach Babies and The Nutcracker with the New York City Ballet. His mother's job helped too. She had connections at casting agencies, and one director, Billy Hopkins, even paid for Macaulay's rides to auditions. By 8, he had landed small roles in Rocket Gibraltar and See You in the Morning. But everything changed in 1989 when he starred in Uncle Buck with John Candy. His performance stole the show. His expressions, timing, and charm made him impossible to ignore. He wasn't just another child actor. He was something special. Macaulay Culkin's life changed forever when he became Kevin McAllister in Home Alone. He was just another kid auditioning for a movie. He was the most famous child actor in the world. The film, directed by Chris Columbus and written by John Hughes, told the story of a boy left behind during Christmas who had to outsmart 2 burglars. It was funny, clever, and had just the right amount of heart. But none of it would have worked without the perfect Kevin. Culkin was the first kid Columbus saw for the role, but the director wasn't sure. He kept looking and auditioned over 200 other children. None of them had the same natural charm. When Culkin came back for a second audition, he had memorized 2 entire scenes from the script. He didn't just say the lines. He became Kevin. That was it. The search was over. When Home Alone hit theaters in 1990, it became an instant sensation. Audiences couldn't get enough of Kevin's wild tricks and hilarious traps. The film made over $285 million in the US alone, breaking records and turning Culkin into a global superstar. His face was everywhere, on posters, magazines, and even lunchboxes. Kevin's scream, his love for cheese pizza, and his fearless attitude became pop culture gold. Culkin's performance was a big part of why the movie worked so well. He made Kevin more than just a mischievous kid. He made him funny, brave, and completely relatable. Critics and audiences loved him. Hollywood noticed too. Suddenly, every major studio wanted him in their next big movie. 2 years later, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, hit theaters. This time, Kevin got separated from his family again, but now he had all of New York City as his playground. The film kept everything that made the first one great and added even bigger stunts and funnier moments. It didn't make as much money as the original, but it was still a massive hit, earning over $173 million in the US alone. For Culkin, the sequel was more than just another blockbuster. It was a financial breakthrough. His salary for the first Home Alone was big for a child actor, but for the second, he earned a jaw-dropping $4.5 million. By the time he starred in Richie Rich in 1994, he was making $15 million per film. At just 14 years old, he was one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. But fame came with pressure. His father, Kit Culkin managed his career and pushed for bigger paychecks. But behind the scenes, things weren't easy. By the mid-90s, Macaulay took a step back from acting. He had made enough money to last a lifetime, and the spotlight had started to feel overwhelming. Even after he left Hollywood, Home Alone never faded. Every December, families around the world watched Kevin defend his house and outsmart the burglars. The film became a holiday tradition. Kids who grew up watching it showed it to their own children. It wasn't just a movie, it was a part of people's childhoods. Decades later, Home Alone is still one of the most beloved films of all time. The slapstick comedy, the clever traps, and the heartwarming story all played a part in its success. But at the center of it all was Macaulay Culkin. He didn't just play Kevin McAllister, he was Kevin McAllister. And no matter how many years pass, that little boy with the big grin will always remind audiences of the magic of Christmas. Macaulay Culkin was everywhere in the early 90s, but as he grew older, everything started to change. He wanted to prove he wasn't just the mischievous kid from Home Alone. He wanted something more. In 1991, he took on a role that was completely different from anything he had done before. My Girl wasn't a slapstick comedy or an adventure film. It was emotional. It was tragic. Culkin played Thomas J., a sweet and fragile boy allergic to almost everything. His performance was heartfelt. The film was a success, earning over $17 million in the U.S. But it wasn't just another hit. It was a turning point. For the first time, audiences saw him as more than just a funny kid. Then came The Good Son in 1993, a movie that stunned everyone. Instead of playing a lovable troublemaker, he became Henry Evans, a boy with no conscience and no remorse. This wasn't the Macaulay Culkin people knew. This was something darker, something disturbing. His cold stare, his unsettling calmness. It was a performance that made people uncomfortable. Critics had mixed opinions on the film, but no one could deny that Culkin had range. He wasn't afraid to take risks. His father, Kit Culkin, had pushed for this role, even threatening to pull him from Home Alone 2, Lost in New York unless he got the part. It was a bold move, and it worked. By 1994, Culkin was still landing major roles, but the excitement around him was fading. He starred in Richie Rich, playing a billionaire kid with a heart of gold. The movie had everything: a fun premise, a well-known character, and Culkin's signature charm. But something was missing. The magic wasn't there. The reviews were lukewarm. And while the movie did fine at the box office, it didn't capture the same energy as his earlier hits. It was clear that audiences were starting to move on. The mid-90s were a strange time for family films. People still loved them. They wanted more depth, more complexity. Culkin was in a tough spot. He was still young, but he wasn't the same wide-eyed kid from Home Alone. He was growing up, and Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. Movies like Getting Even with Dad and The Pagemaster struggled to make an impact. They weren't complete failures, but they weren't the smash hits everyone expected. Suddenly, the biggest child star in the world wasn't so untouchable anymore. Then, at just 14 years old, he did something no one saw coming. He walked away. He was one of the highest-paid child actors ever, making $8 million per film. But he wanted out. He had been working since he was 4 years old. He had never known a life outside of movies. He wanted to go to school, make friends, and just be a normal teenager. Macaulay Culkin and Mila Kunis started dating in May 2002. At the time, both were young stars figuring out their lives in Hollywood. Culkin was still known as the Home Alone Kid, and Kunis was gaining fame from that 70s show. Even with the media watching, they kept their relationship mostly private. In a 2007 interview, Kunis said their life together was simple. They spent time reading, playing video games, and watching movies. She also said Culkin was an amazing cook who made dinner every night. But as the years passed, things got complicated. By 2006, Culkin was living in New York while Kunis was based in Los Angeles. The long distance started to wear on them. In early 2011, they decided to go their separate ways. At the time, Kunis's publicist said the breakup was amicable and that they stayed friends. In 2018, Kunis admitted it wasn't as smooth as people thought. On a podcast, she said she handled the breakup badly and called her behavior in her 20s terrible. She regretted how things ended. Looking back, the breakup gave them both the chance to move forward. Kunis married Ashton Kutcher in 2015, and Culkin found love again with actress Brenda Song. Even though their relationship ended, it was a big part of their lives and shaped the people they became. Years later, Culkin met Song at a gathering hosted by Seth Green in 2014. They didn't start dating right away, but in 2017, they worked together on Green's film Changeland. After filming, they grew closer, and by October, they were seen together in public. They held hands at Knott's Scary Farm and attended events side by side. Unlike many Hollywood couples, they didn't share much about their relationship, choosing to keep things private. In April 2021, they welcomed their first child, a son named Dakota. They named him after Culkin's sister, who passed away in 2008. In December 2022, they had their second son, Carson. Instead of hiring a nanny, they relied on Song's parents for help. Culkin stayed home most of the time, calling himself a homebody dad, while Song balanced work and motherhood. At some point before 2023, they got engaged but never rushed to get married. They joked about eloping but decided to wait so they could include Song's family. In December 2023, when Culkin received his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, fans noticed Song wearing a gold band. Some thought they might have already tied the knot, but the couple didn't confirm anything. Their focus remained on raising their children. Culkin has always spoken highly of Song. He once said he believed in her down to his bone marrow. Their relationship isn't about grand gestures or public attention. It's about trust, love, and building a life together. Macaulay Culkin was one of the biggest child stars in Hollywood, but behind the cameras, his life was anything but glamorous. His father, Kit Culkin, wasn't just his manager. He controlled everything. He made the decisions, handled the money, and pushed Macaulay to work non-stop. Hollywood executives found him impossible to deal with. He delayed films like The Good Son and The Nutcracker just to get his way. What people didn't know was that his son had almost no say in his own career. For years, Macaulay had no idea how much money he was making. His father made sure of that. By the time he finally found out, he was worth around $50 million. That moment came during a nasty custody battle between his parents. Kit had hidden newspapers from him, making sure he never saw headlines about his success. It wasn't just about protecting him, it was about keeping him under control. Macaulay wanted to stop acting. His father refused to let that happen. Kit had tried to become an actor himself, but never made it. By the time Macaulay was 10, he had already outshined anything his father had ever done. Instead of feeling proud, Kit seemed angry. Macaulay later said his father resented him for it. In 1995, everything fell apart. His parents went to court, fighting over custody of their kids. But this battle wasn't just about raising them. It was about controlling Macaulay's career and fortune. His parents had been splitting a 15% commission from his earnings, with the rest placed in a trust. That raised an uncomfortable question. Was this about parental rights or money? Legal documents painted a dark picture of Kit. Patricia, Macaulay's mother, accused him of drinking too much, being abusive, and even abandoning the family. Kit denied it all. He claimed she was making it up to win the case. But Macaulay didn't need a court to tell him the truth. He had lived it. He described his father as cruel. If he didn't perform perfectly, Kit would threaten to hit him. Sometimes, as punishment, he was forced to sleep on the couch. It wasn't just about discipline. It was about power. Macaulay was one of the most famous kids in the world, but at home, he had no control over his own life. At 16, he finally made a decision. He removed his parents from managing his finances. It was the first real step toward taking back his life, but it came at a cost. By 1997, Kit was completely out of his children's lives. The man who had once controlled everything was suddenly gone. But even with his father gone, Macaulay couldn't escape the pressure of fame. In 2004, he was arrested in Oklahoma City for possession of marijuana and prescription drugs. He was briefly jailed and later sentenced to 3 one-year suspended prison terms. The tabloids had a field day, painting him as yet another child star who had spiraled out of control. Then came 2012. Photos of Macaulay looking frail and disheveled sent rumors flying. Headlines speculated about drug addiction, with some claiming he was spending thousands of dollars a month on heroin. The National Enquirer even ran a story saying he had nothing to live for and was close to death. But Macaulay fought back. In an interview with The Guardian, he shut down the rumors, saying, "No, I was not pounding $6 of heroin a month. What bothered him most wasn't the accusations. It was the way the media pretended to be concerned while cashing in on his struggles." He called out the hypocrisy, saying, "No, you're trying to shift papers." Despite everything, Macaulay eventually found peace. He stepped away from Hollywood and built a quieter life, mostly living in France. Fame had once defined him, but now he actively avoided it. When asked about his relationship with the spotlight, he put it simply, "I don't just turn my back on fame, I actively don't want it." Moreover, Michael Jackson and Macaulay Culkin had a friendship that people questioned for years. Some thought it was unusual. Others saw it as something worse. When allegations against Jackson surfaced, their relationship became a major focus. But no matter what the media said, Culkin never changed his stance. He defended Jackson when he was alive and still defended him after he was gone. Before Culkin testified in Jackson's 2005 trial, he sat down for an interview with Larry King. He explained how they first met. Jackson had called him out of the blue while Home Alone was at its peak. They had met briefly before when Culkin was in The Nutcracker. This was their first real conversation. Culkin wasn't like other people who met Jackson. He wasn't in awe of him. He knew he was a pop star, but he wasn't a super fan. He thought that might have been why they got along. He didn't treat Jackson like a legend. He treated him like a normal person. Their friendship wasn't just between the two of them either. The entire Culkin family knew Jackson and spent time with him. King asked about Neverland and what really happened there. Culkin had a clear answer. Neverland was built for fun. It had an amusement park, a movie theater, and an entire arcade filled with video games. People made a big deal about kids staying in Jackson's room, but Culkin said most people didn't understand what that meant. Jackson's bedroom wasn't just a single room. It was 2 stories with multiple bathrooms and enough space to feel like an apartment. Culkin had slept there, but so had plenty of others. He also understood why people misunderstood Jackson. Jackson had spent his whole life in the public eye. He never had a normal childhood and had been sheltered from the real world for decades. He wasn't good at explaining himself, and sometimes that made things worse. When King asked why Jackson preferred the company of kids, Culkin had a simple explanation. Kids didn't care about fame. They didn't treat him differently. He just wanted to hang out and play games. Jackson enjoyed that because, in many ways, he was a kid at heart. Then King brought up the biggest question. What did Culkin think about the accusations? He didn't hold back. He said it was unfortunate, but something about it never made sense to him. If a child had really been hurt, why would a parent settle for money instead of making sure the person responsible went to jail? That didn't sit right with him. To him, the first case against Jackson seemed more about money than truth. He didn't want to get caught up in the media circus surrounding the trial, but when Jackson needed him, he showed up. Culkin's testimony was a major moment. 2 former Neverland employees had claimed they saw Jackson act inappropriately with him in the early 90s. Culkin wasn't in court that day, so he found out through a friend who called and told him to turn on CNN. When he heard what was being said, he couldn't believe it. None of it was true. He had never seen Jackson do anything inappropriate to anyone. and he made that clear in front of the jury. Years later, when Leaving Neverland was released, people waited to hear what Culkin would say. His response was the same as it had always been. In a 2020 interview with Esquire, he addressed the accusations directly. He had no reason to lie. If he had something to reveal, that would have been the time to do it. But he didn't. Nothing had ever happened to him, and he had never seen anything happen to anyone else. He also shared a strange moment with actor James Franco on a plane. Franco brought up the documentary, clearly fishing for a reaction. Culkin shut it down immediately. "Do you want to talk about your dead friend?" he asked. Franco backed off. That was the end of that conversation. Jackson's lawyer, Tom Mesereau, never forgot what Culkin and Chris Tucker did during the trial. Both had people advising them to stay out of it. Both ignored that advice. They told Mesereau that Jackson needed them, and they weren't going to turn their backs on him. Kieran Culkin, Macaulay's brother, had always been skeptical of the media. He had grown up seeing false stories in newspapers and knew better than to believe everything he read. Their father, Kit Culkin, backed that up by describing Neverland as a place filled with guests of all ages. Politicians, celebrities, and families came and went. Former President Ronald Reagan had been a visitor, along with many others. If something sinister had been happening, how did none of these high-profile people ever notice? Despite all this, the media kept pushing the idea that Jackson's friendship with Culkin was strange. Articles still came out years later, some for no real reason at all. One even used Brenda's song, Culkin's partner, wishing Paris Jackson a happy birthday as an excuse to bring it up again. People directly involved never saw anything unusual about the friendship, but the media wouldn't let it go. Macaulay Culkin didn't plan a big Hollywood comeback. He wasn't chasing fame or trying to relive his childhood success. His return to acting happened gradually, with smaller roles that let him explore new sides of himself. He wanted to prove he was more than just the kid from Home Alone. In the mid-2000s, he started picking roles that pushed him in different directions. He appeared in Sex and Breakfast and The Wrong Guys for the Job, two lesser-known films that let him step away from his child star image. But the movie that really changed things for him was Party Monster in 2003. He played Michael Alig, a real-life club promoter who got caught up in drugs, crime, and eventually murder. It was a shocking role for anyone who still pictured him as Kevin McAllister. The film dove into the wild and reckless world of New York's underground club scene in the late 80s. Culkin's performance was intense and unsettling. It proved he was willing to take risks and that he had the talent to back it up. He followed that with Saved in 2004. It was a dark comedy set in a Christian high school. His character, Roland Stockard, was a sarcastic, wheelchair-bound teen who saw through the hypocrisy around him. The film tackled religion, morality, and identity in a way that was sharp and funny. It was another step in his transformation, showing he could handle complex and unconventional roles. Culkin didn't stop at movies. He showed up on Will and Grace in a guest role that let him play with comedy in a different way. He was selective about what he took on, choosing projects that interested him rather than ones that would make him famous again. His approach was careful. He was shaping his career on his own terms, making sure he stayed in control. Years later, he made another splash with his role in American Horror Story, Double Feature. It was another dark and eerie character, proving that even after all these years, he still had something special. That moment led to something unexpected, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2023. It wasn't just about his past success. It was recognition for everything he had done, including the bold choices that set him apart. But acting wasn't his only focus. He had always been drawn to different creative outlets, and the internet gave him a way to experiment freely. He dived into web series and podcasts, creating Bunny Ears, a mix of comedy, satire, and pop culture. It started as a podcast but grew into a full media project with a website and YouTube channel. He filled it with strange and hilarious content, from fake self-help advice to bizarre product reviews. He wasn't trying to be a mainstream entertainer. He was just having fun. making the kind of content he enjoyed. Then there was the Pizza Underground, one of the strangest things he ever did. In 2012, he and a group of friends formed a parody band that rewrote Velvet Underground songs with pizza-themed lyrics. It was ridiculous, and he knew it. Songs like Take a Bite of the Wild Slice and All Pizza Parties were part joke, part tribute, and the band gained an unexpected cult following. At live shows, they even handed out free pizza to the audience. Some people loved it, others didn't. At one festival in England, they were actually booed off the stage. But Culkin didn't care. The band was never meant to be serious. It was just another weird and creative experiment. By 2018, the Pizza Underground was over. It remained one of the most unexpected parts of his career. Beyond acting and music, he found other ways to express himself. He painted, he wrote, and he explored ideas outside of Hollywood. He was never interested in chasing the spotlight. He just followed whatever fascinated him at the moment. Unlike so many former child stars, he didn't try to hold on to his early fame. He let it go and built something new. Culkin once said he was very casual about everything I pursue. That mindset shaped everything he did. He never forced a comeback. He never followed expectations. He just kept creating, kept experimenting, and kept having fun.